Welcome to the I'm Sure They're Doing Their Best podcast with Drew Furguele and Paul Baller. I am very sure they're doing their best, and thank you so much for listening today.
Oh my goodness, it is a Saturday.
It is.
Yeah. How's vacation mode treating you?
So far so good. Didn't do much today besides a little bit of housework. Put up some Halloween decorations.
Yeah, it is getting to be that time.
It sure is.
So do you get trick-or-treaters at your new house?
I don't think we've actually done a Halloween here, or have we? We've been in the house, but sometimes we go other places for Halloween and Beggars Night, so I don't know, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, we're the development we're in is relatively decent sized, and we're connected onto one that is much bigger, so I'm sure we get plenty of kids.
Yeah, so it's the middle of October already, which is just crazy to me.
Yes.
Yeah, do your kids know what they're going for Halloween yet?
I haven't even asked them. I have no idea. Yeah, I'm a good dad. Yeah, it's like,
you are a good dad.
Yeah.
You are a good dad. In point of fact, I've seen you be a good dad.
I don't know what they're doing for Halloween. I'm not even sure if my son's interested. Like, he likes candy, but
So busy week for you. You're on vacation, and you're gonna do some traveling. You're going to see some heavy metal concerts. I'm not going to say where, but tell us about the concert you're going to.
Well, let's see. I went to one last week. My vacation started Thursday night when I traveled to Youngstown, Ohio, to see Ghost. Youngstown, Ohio is a very interesting place. And then this coming week, I am flying to Denver, Colorado to see Tool.
So, okay, a slight diversion here, right? Because you mentioned this to me. I think we talked about this. Maybe it was last podcast, or maybe it was after the podcast.
It was
we were
after
doing some planning.
Yep.
We were doing some planning because there's going to be some travel for each of us coming up here, and vacations and such. And you mentioned you were going there to see Tool, and last time we talked about concerts you went to, it kind of turned me into a Guar fan. I have listened to Tool before, and I definitely know that that's not for me. But talk about like, so on the heavy metal spectrum, Tool's heavier than Guar, right?
You know what? It's hard to say. I mean, Tool's really kind of more hard rocky than metal, but they do get some plays on some metal stations, and it's right on the edge. It's the lines blur, I think, but especially like earlier Tool was much heavier than Tool now. They've almost got kind of like proggy or psychedelic, and honestly, like, I'm more of a fan of Tool's earlier stuff, but they do put on a pretty good live show, and one of the guys that I'm traveling with is like the biggest Tool fan I've ever met. So he's super excited that they put out a new album, like the first album in 13 years or something, and they're touring again to promote that album. So he's super excited.
I feel like Tool has been around for a while. I seem to remember Tool being big,
like early 90s. Yeah,
I was going to say I was probably in middle school the first time I heard Tool. So you're traveling to Denver. It sounds like you have seen them in person before. Do you happen to know how many times? Oh, only one other time.
Only one other time, yep.
And then are there, we did this for the Guar thing. We might as well do it here. Are there tracks you are hoping that they will play?
My favorite Tool song is 46 and 2. I absolutely love that song. Eulogy, H. Really, I don't care at this point. I'm just going. I'm going to enjoy myself. They do put on a pretty good live show. So, yep.
So you're going to be out in the great state of Colorado.
I am in the mountains.
In the mountains.
Yep.
So you're going out there for the show. What day is the show?
It's Wednesday.
So a show's on a Wednesday. You're going to kind of make a week out of it. So when you're not at the Tool concert, do you have other activities planned?
We only have, so I'm going with a group of guys. It's kind of a quote, brocation, unquote. The only thing we really have planned is our Airbnb is like maybe half a mile away from a heavy metal bar called True. So we're going to go there. We're very excited about that. But other than that, I mean, we're a bunch of guys. We don't really plan anything.
I know that you are a hockey fan. I didn't know maybe you were going to try to see, a hockey game while you're out there.
Yeah, I might. It's a possibility. I really haven't looked at the schedule to see when the games are.
Okay.
But yeah.
So you put a link in the show notes for the True Brewing Company, and it's one of those, we're going to be hip and try to be Latin, so the U is actually a V.
Yes.
So it's True, TRVE Brewing Company, Beer, yes. Heavy Metal, Denver. Okay, yep. I feel like it's a good opening statement.
Yep.
Merch. Okay, hold on. Ooh, that's an interesting shirt. This makes for a riveting podcast. But I'm looking at the these guys look like they're all heavy metal fans in these merch pictures.
Yes.
Pretty cool logos. Cool logos. I really like that long sleeve shirt. I'm not even a long sleeve shirt guy. Let's see here. Oh, okay. All right. So they're going to go all in on this. So the beers, okay, so the beers are named very dark.
Yes, they are.
Very angsty 7th grade notebook beer names. So we've got Cold, Cosmic Crypt, Scorn, Lower, Peach Crypt.
Yep.
And then they have Cursed. Yeah, World's Blood. Hey, credit where credit's due. I mean, you're going to be a heavy metal bar. You're going to own it. Find Our Beer. Looking for Our Beer in Colorado. Oh, you can get their beer in Indiana.
Oh.
So, yeah, you can find their beer. Looks like every state except Ohio.
Exactly.
We're literally bordered by places that will have this beer. So they've got it in Indiana. They've got it in Pennsylvania. We don't have it in Ohio. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, that sounds like it's going to be a good time. I hope that it lives up to the hype.
Me too.
So that's good. So you're headed on vacation. I'm going to be working like a sucker. So our podcasting schedule, we're hoping we still get them out on Mondays. I think we still probably can. I don't know if you're gonna. Hopefully you'll have some time. I don't want to rush you.
No, I mean, as long as it all comes down to, if my plane gets delayed, then it could be a little interesting. I fly back like late Saturday morning, so I get back like Saturday afternoon.
Okay.
So we should be fine to record on Saturday. And in a pinch, we'll figure it out. So,
yeah, we're relatively smart guys.
Yeah.
So we will get that figured out. So that's good. I'm happy you're getting some downtime. I think too. I know some of the people you're traveling with. Yep. So that's never really a dull moment.
Nope.
So good. Be safe. Don't.
Thank you.
Don't venture into the mosh pit.
I don't even think there's going to be a mosh pit at this. We have floor seats, but I believe they have like folding chairs out. So I think I actually get a place to put my butt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is unusual. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, if again, stick with this theme, if I was thinking about the things that I would expect to see on this brocation to go see Tool and go to a heavy metal bar, I didn't think like folding seats were something that I envisioned, but
hey.
Yeah, I get it. Tool's been around for a while. Maybe the fan base is a little older.
I have to imagine so, yeah.
Yeah, we have our needs to consider. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, well, good. I really hope you have a good time.
Well, thank you, Drew. I will try.
Yeah. You'll have to come back with stories.
I'll try. If I can share them, I certainly will.
Yeah. Hey, so a little bit of follow-up before we get rolling here. When I listened back to the show last week, because I do listen every week just to see how the final product comes out and listen to the custom intros and everything, I was wondering, did you get a chance to record 631 Guy?
I did not.
Darn it.
Yeah, so I was only at practice on Monday, and he and his kid was not there.
Okay.
So, and I wasn't at practice on Thursday because I was in Youngstown.
Right. Okay. And the show you went to in Youngstown was Ghost.
Ghost, yes.
Now I very fondly remember coming up behind you at your desk, and even with your over-the-ear headphones, hearing Ghost. Again, not a band for me, but Ghost. Okay. I remember when you first started talking about Ghost when we worked together. Are they a relatively new band?
I mean, they're not super new. They have like 4 albums. 4 or 5? Oh, geez. I'm a bad fan. Let's look at their Wikipedia page. 2006 was when they started.
Yeah.
And
Now
they have
Ghost,
4 studio albums. Yeah.
So I have heard Ghost basically described as like metal plus synth. Is that?
Yeah, they're. I mean, they're considered a heavy metal band, but they're very approachable. They're almost kind of poppy. I kind of describe them as a combination of like Blue Oyster Cult and Kiss.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never in a million years did I ever think that I would be hosting a podcast and we would be talking about bands that are like Kiss. I never got into Kiss, and as much 70s and 80s rock as I got into, Kiss was just never something I got.
Yeah. I've never been a big Kiss fan either, but I do like a band with a gimmick, and Ghost has one heck of a gimmick.
Okay, so talk about Ghost's gimmick. What's the conceit?
Okay, so now granted, it's very tongue in cheek. Ghost kind of bills themselves as a. I mean, I'll come on and say they're kind of like if the Church of Satan had people singing hymnals, it would be Ghost. All of the musicians wear masks. They go by nameless ghouls. They don't have any names, and the lead singer also wears a mask, and he has essentially changed characters for every album. The first 3 albums, he was kind of like an anti-pope named Papa Emeritus 1, 2, and 3. This time around, he is Cardinal Copia, a cardinal of the church. So they kind of have a, it's a very, they look a lot darker than their sound is.
Interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a world I know absolutely nothing about. I am so lost. I know that people who listen to Ghost typically end up liking Ghost, and I gave them a shot at your recommendation. Realized it really wasn't for me. They definitely weren't as heavy as I was expecting them to be.
No, they've won a Grammy, so that just kind of puts it in perspective. Yeah.
Is that a good thing?
You know what? It's fine. Sometimes the Grammys, like a lot of times, like bands that I would consider to be good get nominated, but they usually don't win. Usually it's some, band like, I mean, no offense to people who like Metallica, but Metallica, they're pretty weak sauce. I was happy for Ghost. I mean, they started really obscure and, small shows, just word of mouth. And within they've been touring for a little over 10 years now. They're at the point where, they won a Grammy. They're selling out, not huge stadiums, but like the smaller stadiums, getting lots of publicity and, hopefully money. Hopefully he's making money. And, it's just kind of fun. It's, I wasn't on the Ghost train for the first album. I didn't really get exposed to them until I saw their second album. But I've seen them. I think I've seen them live more times than any other band at this point. I think I've seen them 8 times.
I was going to say you do have a repertoire of Ghost concert T-shirts that I've seen you in.
Yeah. This time I bought some Ghost socks this time, so I'm excited about those.
Still counts.
Yep.
So I would say that if you ask me point blank, like what is Paul's favorite band right now, I'd be hard pressed not to say Ghost.
They're always on the list.
Yeah.
I've traveled. I mean, I've seen them in Cleveland, Youngstown. I've traveled to North Carolina to see them. Last year, we flew out to Los Angeles to see their first United States stadium show.
No, they're not. They're not American, right?
They're from Sweden.
They're from Sweden. Sweden.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of all things Scandinavian, by the way.
Well, that's where, all good metal comes from, really, is,
I've heard that. I've heard, I have heard, like, you've got the Finland, Norway, Sweden.
Yep. Scandinavia area.
Iceland, right? Iceland's got some good ones.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. Now, all right, so give the audience some good Ghost tracks. What do you when you go to a Ghost show? What are the ones that really get your compass pointing north, as they say?
I mean, if I was going to tell somebody what tracks to listen to get into Ghost, I would first point them at Rats. It's the first track off of their newest album.
Okay.
It was designed to be played in a stadium. It's kind of that, it's very melodic. It's catchy. Also from that album, Dance Macabre is also really good. And then, what would I recommend? I'm gonna give one more song here, and it's got to be the right one. Yes, I have comments. I upgraded to Catalina today, and I have comments.
Oh, Catalina?
Yeah.
Oh, no, we're going to get to that, buddy. Don't you worry. We're going to get to that.
Yeah. I'm going to go with Ritual. As my third song. Yep.
Okay. I look forward to putting links to YouTube videos for those songs.
Yep.
I'm more interested in the Tool songs than the Ghost songs, I think. But, I didn't expect to become a closet Gwar fan the last time we talked about bands. Maybe I'll change my mind on Ghost. I will say that I have not listened to Tool in a very long time. So when it comes to these bands, I wouldn't know where to start, right?
Yep.
Like, typically when I'm exploring a band, it's because something pops up on my Spotify thing. And the curious thing about me is, like, I'm like really hard pressed to give you a band that I like. I'm not a big going to concerts person. I'm not a person who likes a particular band. I just kind of put Spotify on and just let it roll. Whatever playlist kind of comes up is what I listen to.
So I'm old school. I still listen to albums. Yes.
Yeah, So part of the challenge for me too was I didn't really own any albums or cassettes or vinyls or anything growing up. All I really had were my mom and dad's record and cassette collection, and it was mostly period stuff. Right? It was a lot of Carly Simon. It was a lot of Billy Joel. I don't say that with any denigration, actually. I enjoy their music. I especially like Billy Joel. Carly Simon's got some pretty good stuff. But the one thing, and I think this influenced me more than anything, is my dad had George Carlin albums.
Oh,
so
nice.
I used to listen to National Lampoon albums, George Carlin albums. I really got a taste for comedy at a pretty early age, like comedy albums.
Nice.
And if you grew up in the 90s, the closest thing you really had to stuff like that was like Jerky Boys or Adam Sandler albums or stuff like that.
I remember my friends passing around what Dennis Leary's "No Cure for Cancer" on cassette tape.
That was a good one too. Andrew Dice Clay was also one that got passed around the bus a little bit. But yeah, back in the late 70s, early 80s, that's how most comedy got distributed.
Yeah.
And I was reminded of that because I recently watched that Netflix movie about National Lampoon, because I was a big fan of National Lampoon and those guys back then. But anyway, but that's a long way to say is I just never owned any albums. And then growing up, my mom and dad weren't really big fans of letting us listen to super dirty music. So like all my friends had like rap albums and, stuff like Metallica or stuff that was popular in the in the 80s and 90s, right? When you had those CDs or cassettes, like I didn't have any of that stuff, and I never had it, Instead, I was spending money on like computer games and other stuff like that. So I never really got into music.
Yeah.
But
I grew up with, my dad was, as soon as he had a decent job, he became quite a bit of an audiophile and always had good speakers. And that's what we'd do on Saturday and Sunday mornings. We'd wake up and he would just put music on. So like I had everything from, my mom enjoyed like Neil Diamond and the Bee Gees. And my dad was more into like classic rock. So there was Black Sabbath, there was Pink Floyd, there was Death Row Toll, Jimi Hendrix, stuff like that. And that's what he would do. We had a huge CD collection, and weekend mornings he would just pick a CD, put it on, and play it comically loud. So that's how I got into music. It was always just part of my life. It was always there.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is my dad actually had a nice stereo system. So like in our family room, we actually had like a nice receiver, nice record player, nice tape deck. We had all the ingredients except like music. But what that stuff became instead is like the house we grew up in, especially when I don't think we had cable until like 1988. So like the first 10 years of my childhood, we didn't have cable. So a lot of times when my dad wanted to listen to a Steeler game, or if we wanted to listen to like a Penguin game, like late at night, we would just, kind of turn the lights off in the family room and just kind of lay there with the stereo on listening to like sports.
Okay.
So we would use it for that. But again, like occasionally, and we would play like holiday music. So like, whether it was Easter or Thanksgiving or Christmas especially, we would put on like Mannheim Steamroller or some kind of like, holiday type music or something in the house. But yeah, by and large, we didn't really listen to like my parents didn't own, well, if they did, they certainly didn't play them. Like they didn't have like classic rock or anything laying around the house. So I don't know. Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah. Okay, cool. So we got some Tool links and some Ghost links in there. Yeah, well, I hope you have a good time. Hopefully you guys find more stuff to do.
Thank you.
There's no there's no oceans in Colorado, so I'm not going to tell you to go in the ocean.
No. I've only been to Colorado once, and the mountains really left an impression on me, so I'm excited to go back out there and see those again.
Very cool. I had a good friend of mine that just recently moved to Colorado, and he's really excited to be out there. So, okay, all right, moving on here. I know that we have Catalina as a topic, and that'll probably be a pretty long discussion because I know that I have thoughts, and it sounds like you have thoughts.
Yep, I have thoughts.
Yeah, so that's macOS Catalina for all you non-Mac users out there. But before we get to that, is there anything else you want to talk about before we get rolling?
I just want to say really quickly, I finally got a chance to go to Casa de Drew to play a board game and bask in the full majesty of your board gaming table, and it is magnificent. I am all sorts of jealous.
Well,
yeah.
Jealous is a strong word. I mean, it's one of those things where we're both men of means.
Yeah,
I'm sure if you really wanted one, you could get one.
The hard part is getting the spousal approval to put it in the house.
Yeah.
So it is something else. You have a wonderful piece of furniture, Drew.
Yeah. Now you've been to my house. I don't have a very big house. Part of that is a function of the area of town I live in and the fact that, it keeps my house payment really low. But I don't have a very big house. And I'm not sure if you had been to the house before I redid the living room and turned it into my office/game room.
Yeah, I've been there. Yep.
Yeah. So you remember what it used to look like. So that's all been pretty much cleared out. Now the board game table is like the dominant piece of furniture in that room. But it's not too big for the room. I probably could have gone. It fits the room
really nicely. Yeah.
It does. It fits the aesthetic. So what Paul's talking about was, we're recording this on a Saturday tonight. Part of that was, Thursday didn't work for Paul. And then Friday night, I had a board game night here. Had Paul over finally to see the table and some other friends of ours to play some games. good time was had by all. We played
was.
Tapestry. We played we played Welcome to. So so Paul, you like the table.
Love the table.
You want to give some impressions of it? Like, what do you like?
So, I mean, it's obvious the fact that if you look at board gaming tables, right, they're recessed where you put the board game down. But being able to kind of just prop your arms up on the I guess the rim of the table and look down at the game, was, you're not shaking the table, you're not bumping pieces. The fact that, the cup holders are below the table, so there's absolutely no chance of spill. The food is at a different level. You're not getting crumbs all over the place. The speed cloth is the cover, the material you have on there, right?
Yep.
That was really nice. Things didn't slide around, but it wasn't so grippy that you couldn't pick cards off the table. It was, it's one of those things where you don't need one to have a good board game night, but wow, like it just took it to that next level. It's just,
yeah, and
it's spectacular.
I think I've made mention on here is that, outside of a few like unicorn games that I would love to have in my collection, I don't buy as many board games as I used to. Now, when a game has some hype, or I play something that I don't own and when I want it, I will buy it. Instead, my focus on the hobby has been on enhancing play experience, and that goes in the forms of like, game organizers, stuff that basically helps me enjoy a game I like even more. So that's why something like a board game table is such a good investment, is because it gives you a dedicated surface to play on. It has some features that make playing those games pretty fun. So, that's kind of why, that's part of the reason I took that plunge to get the table. Now, though I will say that it's definitely not perfect, and part of that was exposed in the second game we played last night, and that was the game Welcome to, which is a game where you have to do a pen and paper thing. Now, when you buy a board game table, if you go through this process, obviously you have what they call the vault area, and that's what you described as kind of having the recessed area to play a game. A lot of times you can either have a vault that will raise to the level of the rail that you discussed, so that it kind of it forms a consistent layer with no gaps or anything. But typically what you have is you have some sort of topper that goes on the table for a hard surface. Now, the game we played last night required pens or markers or stuff, and having that speed cloth surface, like, you really can't write on that. So in order to play that game, I had to find something to basically put under everybody's score sheet that they could write on. So, if I have any regrets about buying the table, I probably would have skipped the LED lighting. As cool as it is, it's kind of gimmicky, and it was probably way more money than it needed to be for the feature that it provides. And I probably should have bought a topper, because having a hard topper for that, just to keep dust off the table, and then for situations where we have those writing games, that would have been the only thing. But the problem is I probably would have got a white topper, and any ink that would have bled through would have shown up on it anyway. So
that's true.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, it was really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, we also played Tapestry, which I think everybody enjoyed.
That is a spectacular game.
Yeah,
if you like,
you won.
Yeah, I did win by a single point. If you like a lighter Euro game, I would highly recommend it. It was highly competitive, but the rules were extremely straightforward. The design of the game, the game uses a lot of symbols to let you know what actions are available. And I don't think I've ever played a game where the symbols were as easy to learn and figure, like, they were, almost all of them were obvious. And even the ones that weren't obvious became obvious as soon as you realized what they were trying to tell you. It was done. The game was really fun. The components were top notch, and the design of the game was just really well. It was all around. It was a great night.
Yeah. So the game is made by Stagmeyer Games, and I don't think I played a bad game by that publisher, and they are definitely one of their strongest features is they're really, really good with their iconography. Whether you have games like Wingspan, you have Tapestry, you have Scythe, you have Viticulture. pretty much every single one of those games has very, very strong iconography that does not slow the game down at all. And, it was a really good game. It was really interesting because as we were playing, I was just waiting for the avalanche of points to start rolling in, because it's a game where you get points, and then, a lot of us had a different approach to the game, and we all sort of scored points in different little spurts.
Yes.
Our friend Robert of #RobertThoughts, he had an interesting strategy for where 3/4 of the game, I think he had 8 points, and then he went from like 8 to like 120 in 2 turns. Like, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was a valid strategy, and he almost pulled it off.
Yeah, he almost did.
But he went just a little too hard into it.
Yeah,
but yeah, really, really fun game. I'm glad we had a good time. So we're gonna try to do another one of those, depending on if you get back in time. Maybe we'll try to do another game night there. But
okay,
we'll have to see. Okay. Anything else before we get into what I consider to be the main topic tonight?
Nope, let's do it.
All right. So earlier this week, I mentioned on the show last week that I was hoping to do a clean install of macOS Catalina. We talked about some of the upcoming features last time. Paul and I are obviously Mac users. I was looking forward to it just because, my machine came installed with the previous version of OS, which is macOS Mojave. And I use my Mac for work. It's a managed device. So, last show I talked about how when Catalina launched, I was hoping to basically do a clean wipe, install Catalina, and then maybe not have my device managed by my employer and just use web-based applications to do everything. So I want to come back and talk about my experience setting it up. It was unfortunate that the release did not drop on the Friday that we were hoping. It dropped on a Monday night.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a long weekend to do it. So basically I sat down on Monday night and I went through the process of cleaning my Mac out. And this is the first topic I want to talk about because, Paul, did you do an upgrade or a clean install?
I did an upgrade.
Okay.
Only because I didn't want to spend the time. Well, so I have a plan. The next Mac that I buy is going to be a clean install, a fresh install. So I'm kind of saving all of that until I get a new laptop. So this one was just an upgrade.
So I did not do an upgrade. Again, my Mac, outside of some things like some VMs, is very much a transient machine in that all the code that I'm working on is in source control. Everything that I care about on there is stored in my OneDrive. There's not other than some desktop background pictures, which I'll get to that topic in a minute, that everything can basically go on that machine at any time. In fact, all my machines are like that. Even my gaming PC and everything. There's not a lot on those machines that I really care about. The stuff I really care about is backed up in the cloud somewhere or on my local network NAS. So anyway, I decided to do a clean install, and I had never in my life had more trouble with an install than I did with Catalina. And I have done fresh installs of macOS before. So for those of you that have never installed macOS before, Apple definitely, I think, wants you to basically do in-place upgrades. You get a pop-up notification on your Mac that you have a software update available. And it's like any other software update that you do, whether you're using Windows, whether you're using Linux. You just basically do an update. Your computer will reboot a few times, and boom, you've got the newest version of your OS on the computer. Installing a fresh OS on a Mac is a little bit of a chore because, if you've ever installed Windows, you've probably installed it from a CD, or maybe you have an ISO somewhere that you have access to. It doesn't work that way for Mac. No. So what's really fascinating about Mac is that your computer is basically your license for the OS, right? There's never a license key that you have to put in to install Mac OS. You can only install Macs on approved Mac hardware, and they have some checks in place for that. But you there's never a license code. However, getting a bootable USB of macOS is an adventure, because what you essentially have to do is you have to download the OS update and then not apply it. And and then once you do that, you have to go into your terminal and you run some terminal commands to then format a USB stick with the installer on it. And for as long as I can remember, I've always been comfortable doing that piece. And then you boot up your Mac, you hold down an arcane series of keystrokes, you boot from the USB, you can then launch a series of system utilities from that bootable USB. You can, clean out your hard drive partitions, you can do health checks, you can do backup restores through Time Machine. There's a suite of things that go along with that. And then you do your clean install. However, this is the first Mac that I've owned with a T2 security chip.
Okay.
So the clean install, I had a lot of trouble. So first things first was I wasn't able to boot into the USB. And the reason for that was I would put in the USB, I would hold down the option key, I would boot, it would see the USB and I would click on it. But I kept getting an error that it didn't have access to my network to validate the OS.
Interesting.
So it took me a few reboots to figure out when you first boot up to that boot menu in macOS, you can pick a wireless network. You have to do that before you boot the USB, because it basically stores that. I just thought that you need, like, my thought was that little drop down for the Wi-Fi was there in case you wanted to do a network boot. No, it's there. It's there to basically use that network for your next boot process, if that makes sense.
And they also have an option for kind of like internet recovery. Like if you don't have media around, you kind of need to like just get your computer back to factory settings. You can download. I think it automatically downloads whatever version of the operating system was installed on it originally. Yeah, but it can do that over the internet. But I had no idea you had to do that to boot off of a. Wow.
Yes.
That's not intuitive at all.
No, it's really not. And, Macs, by and large, are pretty intuitive. This, like I said, I just kind of tried it because it's weird, because after you pick that, your computer then like reboots again and boots to the USB. So somewhere it's storing your Wi-Fi credentials through that reboot and then getting to the USB. So I got past that step, and then I got to the step where, okay, it was time to install macOS. Unfortunately, because my drive is File Vault and I was using a USB boot, it would not let me touch the hard drive during the install. So I had to reboot back into my OS, and I had to go to my security settings to allow USB boot to interact with my drive. So then I rebooted again, rejoined the Wi-Fi, booted into the install, and then I was finally able to clear out my partitions and do the install. So I spent probably twice as long figuring out actually how to just do my install versus installing the actual OS. So once that was done, you have to go through the process of, setting up your user ID again and resetting up all your system settings, which is kind of a bummer, right? Like I have to redo my fingerprints for the fingerprint Touch ID, all my settings, my desktop backgrounds, stuff like my sound settings. Like there's a lot of like little fiddly things that I'm sure I could probably automate somehow on the Mac. I just don't know how to get everything back the way I want it. So I did that on a Monday night, and I basically got it to the point where I had all the stuff that I need to do my job. So things like VS Code and Git and, a couple other utilities that I use, but I didn't install the Office suite. Like I said, I really wanted to try to use the web-based versions to see if I could get away with doing that without having to make my device manage to get to things. But by and large, the install went pretty good for me. So I'll hit pause there because I have more to add that I want to talk about the experience so far. But so, Paul, talk about your upgrade experience.
It was actually really easy. I just went to, system preferences, said, yep, update, walked away for 45 minutes, and I had Catalina installed, so the upgrade went flawlessly. My first experience with the operating system was a little less spectacular.
All right, so let's dive in. So tell me what happened.
Okay, so obviously, I did an upgrade, so I have lots of applications installed. I also have lots of little utilities that I run that kind of live up in the menu bar. Probably more than I should, but all of them have a very, a place in my heart. So after my first boot, I log in, and it was comical how many, like, all these applications are booting. It's like, hey, this app wants to show you notifications. This app wants to show you notifications. This app wants access to your desktop. This one wants access to your desktop and your documents. And just saying, okay, for every single one of those. And before, when I was launching Spotify to kind of look at the list of songs, it was like, hey, Spotify wants to send you notifications. Hey, Spotify wants access to your documents folder. And I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to make, this started with iOS, right? Where applications have to ask permissions to do certain things. And they keep adding more and more of those to macOS, but it feels like they went too far on this one. Like, everything I launch is just full of, like, an application asking for permissions, and
yeah, so that's definitely one thing I've noticed as well. So again, doing a clean install, there were a lot of reinstalls of applications from the web, right? So things like Git and Visual Studio Code and Spotify and the stuff that I use every day, I had to reinstall. So on a Mac, when you fire up Safari or whatever your web browser of choice is and you download something, it goes to your downloads folder. Yeah. And then it either expands into a package installer or an installer on your desktop. And for package installers, you have to first allow that to run. If it's downloaded from the internet from from something that isn't Apple, sometimes it lets you do that, sometimes it doesn't. So you have to get past that screen, and then you do the install. And a lot of the installers are trying to be helpful, because what will happen is after you run that package installer, it just stays in your downloads. So what the package installers are designed to do is to basically say, hey, do you want to move this to trash? Well, on Mojave, that works seamlessly. You just click it and it moves the installer to your trash and you're all good. But with this new security model that they have, every time you run an installer, it's like, this wants permission to your downloads folder because it has to move it out of your downloads folder, right? Yep. So it's an extra dialog box that pulls up. So the little annoyances of that stuff is kind of through the roof. Like you said, I totally understand why. I just wish it was a preference that you could just set. And maybe you can. Yeah. Like, maybe there's something under the hood that you can, but I haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah.
Did you lose? Were there any 32-bit app casualties for you?
I had whittled everything down. There was this great tool. If you're on the fence about upgrading it, what is it called? It's called Go64. I was running that before, and it basically just scanned all of my applications and told me which ones were 32-bit. And so I had some older ones that I really didn't care anymore. There's only one application that I use. I don't use it all the time, but I occasionally need it, and that is the My Harmony software that controls my Logitech Harmony remotes. So before I made the plunge, I made sure that I had a Mojave Mac OS virtual machine with My Harmony on it, and it could talk to all my remotes and work correctly. And then that was kind of, after I saw that work in the VM, that's what kind of gave me the confidence to take the plunge into Catalina. So far, so good. I really have noticed anything else that's not working. Do you have anything, Drew?
Yeah, so, everything has been working for me. I haven't had any showstoppers. I'm really enjoying it so far. It's nice having a clean install. It's the first clean install I've done since I bought the computer, which I think I will have officially had for almost a year. I think I got it in November last year. So I think this computer is almost a year old. It is a late 2018 model MacBook Pro. But everything I have seems to be working just fine. I certainly don't have any problems with the upgrade. I mean, like I said, other than the slight security annoyances that are out there, the install process being a little cumbersome and frustrating for me. Otherwise, it went pretty well, and so far I'm enjoying the OS. So, one thing I do want to talk about is moving away from the default Bash shell in macOS to ZSH or Z shell.
So you took the plunge.
Well, you have to.
Right? No. So for me, when I launch Terminal, it politely lets me know that I'm still running Bash, and if I want to switch to ZSH, I can run this command, which I haven't done yet.
So, all right. So for those people listening who don't live in shells a lot, so macOS is built on top of, I think it's technically free. It was something of one-time free BSD.
Yes.
And it is a Linux/Unix type environment under the covers. So even though you have that touchy-feely macOS point-and-click interface, there's actually a really capable kernel underneath there, and you can live in a shell. And I do a lot. So when I'm doing source control stuff or PowerShell stuff or Python development, I live in my shell on my Mac quite a bit. So, and I'm no stranger to Bash. Now, before I start diving into this, I will say that I am not a Bash expert. There's a lot of things that you can do in shells in Linux, and the Bourne-Again shell or Bash is probably the most common one. I think it's the default shell on pretty much every distribution of Linux still. I don't know. I don't know. I just know that it is on Ubuntu. I'm pretty sure it's in CentOS. I'm pretty sure it's in Red Hat. I'm pretty sure it's in Fedora. I'm almost positive it's the default shell anywhere. So with this recent release, before I jump into that, so macOS, has been the default shell. If you launch your terminal app on your Mac, you get a Bash shell. Okay. Now with macOS Catalina, the default shell on the OS now is Z shell or ZSH. And there are differences between the Bash shell and ZSH or Z shell. So now you said, Paul, doing an in-place upgrade, the type of shell you use is tied to your user profile. It is a setting that gets set to say, when you launch a terminal, this is the shell you get. And it works that way on any Unix or Linux-based system. If you're using Ubuntu, or if you're using CentOS, or if you're using whatever, you can issue commands to change your shell. So for Paul, doing the upgrade, you are in Bash, and the system reminds you of Z shell. I don't get that choice. My new user profile, when I did my clean install, has gone to Z shell. So, listen, I was excited to try Z shell because I had heard a lot of people say that Z shell is, from a productivity standpoint, much better. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of little time-saving shortcuts and aliases and plugins and stuff that you can do with Z shell that you can't necessarily do with Bash. But on the flip side of that, there are things you can do in Bash that you can't necessarily do in Z shell. And for as much as I like to talk about doing automation and writing PowerShell and doing DevOps and stuff like that, one area that I'm still a little bit weak is I'm not a good Bash scripter. So my experience with scripting in Bash really only extends as far as like issuing commands to containers and like setting environment variables and getting their values. Like that to me is about as far as I've gone with Bash scripting. So I can still do those things with Z shell. The commands aren't necessarily different, but you do, as I understand it, you do lose a little bit of that ability without using a typical or traditional Bash shell, as I understand it. So, but the nice thing about going to Z shell is there is a community project called Oh My Zish, right? ZSH or Oh My Z shell. And what's really cool about Oh My Zish is you can get different plugins that you basically download. Ooh. And they call them plugins, but really what they are is just fancy aliasing and tab completion. So if you're constantly using Git, or you're using Docker, or you're using Kubernetes, or you're using Go, or you're using whatever, you can download plugins specific to those things, and you get some enhanced functionality to your shell. The ones that I use is I I have been using ones for Git and ones for Docker. And just having that tab completion is really nice, but the Git one in particular, telling you what branch you're currently working in, if you have anything that is not staged for commit or stuff like that, just right on your command line is pretty cool. So by and large, I have successfully transitioned to Z Shell. I'm liking the plugin support. I'm liking the look and feel of it. I am a big fan of iTerm 2 on the Mac. I think that is the best terminal program I might have ever used. So I'm having a really pleasant experience with it so far. And traditionally I have always set up my bash shells using bash profiles to set colors and cursor formatting. So with Z Shell, I'm letting the plugins handle the formatting of the prompt, and the themes letting they handle the prompt formatting, because the different plugins change around the prompt differently. And I'm letting the iTerm themes change my colors. So I've, instead of spending time, doing some arcane bash profile work to make my terminal a certain color, I'm letting iTerm handle that. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good. If you haven't tried it yet, Paul, if you haven't seen the Oh My Zish thing, I would definitely check that out.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through it right now. It looks very cool. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah.
So before I move on and talk about terminal fonts, because this is going to turn into terminal talk really quick. Anything else about Catalina for your upgrade?
I had just one more nagging little problem, and I think I found the solution online, but it kind of sucks. So I keep my system preferences icon in my dock, right? That's kind of your system settings, and it has a badge with a 1 in it. And clicking on it, it's like, hey, I need to sign into my Apple ID. It says, update Apple ID settings. Some account services will not be available until you sign in again. So I sign in again, and then the badge goes away, and then it comes right back with the exact same error. And looking online, apparently I have to sign out of iCloud on my Mac, reboot, and then sign back into iCloud, and that will fix it.
So
yeah.
I gotta be honest. I really don't use Apple Cloud for anything, and that's not a knock against Apple Cloud stuff. It's just that Google's got my email and my contacts. Microsoft. Well, Google also has some of my personal Drive stuff that I share with people. Microsoft's got my OneDrive stuff, and OneDrive is what I use for pretty much personal and work stuff. I have separate OneDrive accounts for both. That's not me being a shill. It's just because it's integrated into every OS I use. But, I typically haven't used Apple Cloud stuff, only because I don't pay for anything iCloud. And I just get tired of my phone telling me, like, I can't back up your phone because it's more than 10 gigs. So I turn all that off. I turn off picture syncing because I use Google Photos for that. I turn off backup. I turn off contacts. I turn off mail. So I'm not in the iCloud ecosystem at all. But I know, while I'm not having the exact same problem that you are having right now, I have had so many weird inconsistencies with iCloud on phones and computers. So I don't live in that world because I just don't use it, but I definitely feel your pain.
Yeah, I'm all in. Like, I use iCloud Drive. I use it for my photos. My contacts are in there. Safari bookmarks get synced. And it was really kind of rough when they first rolled it out. I generally don't have any problems with it. It usually works pretty well. But this little thing is annoying. It's just like, hey, sign in. And I know it's a lie because I'm going to sign in. And then it's just going to break again. But yeah, and I'm also a little like, I looked, did the whole Google search, and people are like, yeah, just sign out of iCloud and reboot and come back in. But I'm like, is that gonna work? Like, I have so much stuff in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I have, let's see, I'm using 155 gigs of the 200 gigs I pay for. Yeah, because that's, that I also use it to back up my phones. iMessage is synced to there, documents, photos, and video. Yeah, so I use quite a bit.
Yeah, like I said, I've got other avenues for that stuff, and maybe one day I'll consolidate down to one. I mean, again, being a Mac user, it'd be nice to get all that in one ecosystem. But we'll see. Right now, what I've got works. I've got my workflow. The only other casualty here was, I was definitely living the quote unquote rogue life, where I was just using my web-based versions of my software for corporate communications, so like email and Teams and things, and everything was working until Friday. When I started getting the dreaded notices automatically when I was trying to view things like your device must be managed to view this stuff. So I did have to go back and remanage it. So I am back in my email client. But honestly, like using the Outlook web client is not terrible. It's come such a long way. The Teams web client is perfectly fine. But I do like the native Teams app. I will say that, on the Mac at least. The Mac client is actually really good. The Windows client can still be kind of iffy, but the Teams Windows client is actually, or the Teams Mac client is actually pretty good. So I am back to the native app experience for now. So if it didn't make me, I probably would have stuck there, but it is a work computer, so I just had to suck it up. Okay, so next thing to talk about, probably to close this out, is now that I have to redo all of my terminal stuff, I went on the hunt for the best kind of terminal and, to some extent, the best programming font that I could find.
Yep.
So, I don't know if you took a look, but if you're looking at the Oh My Zish page, there's a lot of plugins on there. And the one in particular that shows off the GitHub integration requires what are called Powerline fonts. Paul, do you want to tell everybody what a Powerline font is?
Well, so I think you better tell me what a Powerline font is. I think I know what it is, but I'm gonna mess it up.
Well, let me get the link up here.
Okay.
So,
because I think I use something very similar for another tool, a tool that I have installed for Bash. Yeah. I think it's actually even the same font. Hold on. Yep.
So basically, Powerline is a plugin, and it's basically, it was originally designed for I think it was originally designed for, I want to say VI, maybe it was Vim, I don't know, it was VI or Vim, and it basically is a plugin that provides different like little status lines in the application, right? It was text-based like prompts and things like that. And in order for it to work, your font had to be compatible. Otherwise, you would get like question marks, or you would get like non-ANSI characters for some of the things. I think that's what it was. So the people who wrote the Powerline plugin also put some things in there for like ZSH, Bash, and a couple other utilities as well. So if you have a Powerline font, basically what that means is that it's compatible with the Powerline plugin. But these days it means a little bit more than that. So in terms of the ZHS shell that I'm using, if you use the GitHub plugin, it uses certain glyphs in the font that aren't necessarily available in every font like library. So if you use the default terminal font on a Mac, which is the font called Menlo, if you load up those plugins, it doesn't show up correctly because it's not Menlo is not considered to be a Powerline font. So there are certain fonts that are quote unquote Powerline enabled. And, the two most popular ones are there's this one called Firacode and this other one called Hack. So those to me, like if you go online and you Google best programming font, those are probably the two that are going to be at the top of your search results. And part of it has to do with the fact that, one, they are Powerline compatible. Two, they support what are called ligatures. They're just pleasant to look at. They're monospaced. I think they are both sans serif. They're just a really pleasant looking font that looks good in. They're both kind of just really pleasant to use when you're programming. So, I use Hack for my Visual Studio Code installations, and other IDEs that I use. And then for my current iTerminal prompt, I'm using Fira Code. And they both work really well with ZSH. They work very well with the plugins I'm using for ZSH. And everything looks the best that it can be. So I put a note in here in our show doc this week to talk about these different programming fonts and what people are using. And I think you were the one that initially turned me on to Hack way back in the day. And Hack has been a mainstay for me, at least before I changed to Mac. I was using Hack on all my Windows computers. I tend to use Menlo a lot on the Mac just because it comes with it, and I think it's a decent-looking font to program in. But Hack's pretty good. Hack's pretty close to that. Fira's a little more condensed. Yeah. The one thing I will say is that with Fira, if you haven't tried it yet, Paul, is you know how fonts have weights like bold, semi-bold, regular, italic, whatever? Fira has what they call a retina weight that looks good on a retina display. I think you should give it a shot.
Well, here's the thing. So Hack does not support ligatures. And that's why I love it.
Okay, so let's talk about ligature. So what's a ligature?
Okay, so a lot of times when you're programming, you're using lots of symbols. And like the one I always kind of point to is like you do like a double equal, like an equal sign, and then the greater than symbol to make an arrow, right? Or you do two equal signs together. And what a ligature does is it combines those characters together into kind of what they logically are, right? So if you're trying to draw an arrow with an equal and the greater sign, it actually makes it look like an arrow. And a lot of people, like if you go to the Fira Code website on GitHub, you can see lots of great examples of ligatures. And a lot of programmers that I know really, really like them. And I do not begrudge those people for liking ligatures, but ligatures hurt my brain.
And I agree with you because if you've been programming for a long time and you do a doubles equals or a not equals or something like that, your brain can lock onto those pretty quickly when you're scanning code. Yeah. And if you start moving the ligatures, they're a little harder to find. So if you're not used to looking at them, they do appear a little bit alien, and they do take some getting used to. I do agree with you.
Yeah, and I've tried using a font with ligatures, and like it just breaks my brain because I expect, like, even though they are showing them together, like fun in the text stream, they're still individual characters. So you're deleting when it's combined these two, even three characters together. You still delete them one at a time, right? So as you're deleting them, the ligature kind of breaks, and you see the characters that are the characters left that was made up with it, and it just really bothers me. So that's why I've always kind of avoided these new wave of ligature heavy fonts, and I've been a Hack fan for a very long time now. I think it came out a few years ago, and I mean, I just love this font. Everything is crisp. Everything, like, it's a programmer's font, right? So you can tell a 0 from a capital O very easy. I love the shape of, the braces. And I've been using Hack so long that for me, Hack is programming. Like, that's what a programming font should look like. But then on the other hand, there's a new font that came out, and it's on the list here, right? That came out relatively recently from Microsoft, called Cascadia?
Yeah, it's called Cascadia Code, and it's a new font that Microsoft actually has released, and they have a GitHub for it. You can contribute to it if you want. And it is a programming font, and it's fine. I've tried it. I went back to Hack shortly after I started using it, just because I was messing around with ZSH, and I just wanted to be consistent. But it's a pretty decent font.
Yeah, and I know it has ligatures, but it looks good. It looks good. I'm super impressed with it.
Now, one other thing to note is I think that depending on how the font is created, you can control ligature usage. So the two examples I have is in my terminal program, iTerm 2, you can have it use ligatures or not.
Okay.
So when you go into the options to set your profile's default font, there is a checkbox for use ligatures.
Okay.
And some fonts it's grayed out if the font, I think it's if the font doesn't support ligatures. So if your font doesn't support ligatures, that box is grayed out. If it does support ligatures, you can use it, but iTerm basically tells you that it actually degrades performance in the terminal. So you can disable the use of ligatures in iTerm 2. In Visual Studio Code, it is also in the options to use ligatures or not. So I think that it can be software controlled. If you want to use them, great. If not, you don't have to.
That's good to know.
Yeah, so if you use either of those applications, and your development environment may vary, but check that out. And see what you think. But yeah, all of those are good fonts, and I really, really like the default Menlo font in Mac. I do. Yeah, it just looks good.
It's solid, and I think they also have a new version of San Francisco that is mono-spaced called San Francisco Mono, I believe. And San Francisco is, for those of you who aren't educated, it's Apple came out with it a couple years ago, I believe, and it's designed to be one font that's good on screen, on print. It is now like the Apple font. Hold on, Apple. Let's make sure.
Well, the old Apple font was what, Chicago or something?
Yeah. Then they were using Menlo for a long time. Yeah, and now So I just popped up Xcode for the first time in a long time, and the default font it is now using is San Francisco Mono, and it's fine. But while I'm in here, I'm going to change it to Hack.
Oh, okay.
All right.
A good font is important.
I love fonts. Fonts are
we could probably go a lot longer on fonts, but we'll spare everybody there. So yeah, check out those fonts. We'll put some links in show notes and everything, and then we'll go from there. So Paul, what do you say we wrap this one? So talk about where people can find us.
You can reach us on Twitter at doingbestpod. You can send us an email at contact@doingtheirbest.com. Keep sending us those intros. I've got a few more. I can't wait for Drew to hear the one I'm going to put in front of this episode.
Oh boy.
Yep. I wish if I would have had a little bit more time to set up, I would have set it up and played it for you to get your reaction. But it'll be good. Yeah. So we love the intros. We love the feedback. Keep sending it to us. Where can people find you on the internet, Drew?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at PITTFURG. And like Paul said, definitely send us your questions, send us your topics, send us whatever you want. We'll talk about anything, because we don't want to just talk about stuff that we like. There are no bad topics except for the ones we don't like. So
exactly.
Don't be afraid to send us anything.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, Paul, I hope you have a great vacation.
Well, thank you.
Yep, we will talk when you get back. So for everybody else, Paul, did you talk about where people can find you on Twitter? I forget.
Yeah, I'm on the Twitters at Paul Baylor, BAHLER.
Yep. Well, we will talk to everybody next week.
Indeed.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.